Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good. Nice to see you. We ask that you take your seats. We'd love for you to come and sit in the front tables, if you could. And we'll begin in just one moment. We welcome you to the 132nd City Law Breakfast here at New York Law School. I call to the podium our Dean and President, Anthony Crowell.
Good morning, everyone. How are you today? I just want to welcome everyone to New York Law School, or as I always say at these breakfasts, New York's Law School. And thank you, Ross, and to all of our students. And in particular, I want to give a shout out early to Robin Lamagne, who is a 1L in the evening division here and who is one of our most passionate and dogged students. She wanted to be here at New York Law School. She works at NYCHA. We couldn't be more proud of her and more supportive of the amazing work she's doing. So thank you, Robin, for being here. And as you know, the law school is celebrating its 125th anniversary, our quasquicentennial. And this year's lineup for City Law Breakfast, as City Law has just marked its 20th anniversary, has really been an all-star lineup, as they say. And I'm really excited about today's speaker. With so much emphasis on housing policy by the de Blasio administration, we've been really lucky to have many of the key players, the movers and shakers in that area come to speak at these breakfasts. And today's guest has one of the most influential and significant roles in all of that, Shola Olatoye, Chair and CEO of the Housing Authority. It's one of the toughest jobs in the city, one of the toughest jobs in the state, and one of the toughest jobs in the nation, if not around the world, but certainly one of the most worthy jobs and an extraordinary range of responsibilities to run the largest public housing agency in the nation, providing housing for over 620,000 New Yorkers. And she's certainly working hard every day to make NYCHA sustainable for future generations, and recently launched a 10-year strategic plan called Next Generation. We're eager to hear from you as to what's happening at NYCHA, especially since our law school has a deep and abiding interest in the policy issues affecting the city, and housing policy is at the top of the list. And as you all know, lawyers are critical to housing policy, and our law school is proud to be a leading forum and incubator for policy ideas and discussions in this area. And we really have a wonderful group of faculty members who are committed to this issue. And I want to specifically recognize Professor Andy Shearer, who's our policy director at our Impact Center for Public Interest Law. His leadership on the Right to Counsel project has really been exceptional and spurred city government to action on housing issues. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, for being here. And Professor Sandler will come back to the podium and give some remarks. I want to give a special shout out before I leave to my oldest friend in city government. We started out together the very same day in I think it was September 8th, 1997. We sat next to each other at the law department as new assistant corporation counsels, and we have been close friends since and grown in our careers in wonderful ways. David Farber, who is now, and we've worked together all these years. He's now the general counsel at NYCHA and acting chief of staff, and he's just done and so many other hats, and he's done an extraordinary job. And I'm really, really happy when the chair was asking for recommendations. I said, oh, David's great. Yes, absolutely consider him. And it was an inspired choice in my view because he came from a background of really working in economic development, but had so many issues that touched on important social policy matters. And he's brought this incredible technical expertise in the law, a broad knowledge of the law, but also this passion for helping others. And it's a set of rare qualities, one that I think many in this room have, but still a set of rare qualities. And so we're not only lucky to have the chair here and her extraordinary vision and expertise, but also her great general counsel. So thank you.
Well, Let me start by saying that the NYCHA is truly one of the most important agencies that city government has. Born of the idealisms of the 1930s and the needs of the 1930s, enormously enlarged after World War II, now dealing with difficult infrastructure issues, legacy issues, human issues. It is truly a monumental job. Shola Olatoye, Chair and CEO, born in Waterbury, Connecticut, raised in that city, public schools, Wesleyan University, Wagner School, Masters of Public, from the Wagner School, worked in New York in so many public areas, starting at New York Cares early on in her career, then moving on to Campaign for Fiscal Equity, the wonderful organization that has fought for school equity, moving on into housing, vice president of HSBC Bank, vice president of Enterprise Community Partners, who have built housing here in the city and around the country. She comes with an enormous expertise in supervising and bringing housing, affordable housing, to be built. She has a personal sense of the importance of public housing. I took the moment to look at her speech when she was appointed, and she talked about her grandmother who lived in Albany houses in the Bronx, and how important that apartment and that housing was to her grandmother and to her entire family. She's part of a team here under de Blasio administration. We've been fortunate to have Carl Weisbrod here and Vicki Bean, major players in the probably one of the most important, maybe the most important initiative of the de Blasio administration, the affordable housing issue. She's the third major player that addressed this breakfast series. I am delighted that she's here today. I welcome to the microphone Shola Olatoye.
Good morning. It is so wonderful to be here at New York Law School. I want to thank the Dean for the invitation and for perhaps one of my best hires to date. And he's absolutely right. When I called him and said, I need a smart, thoughtful lawyer who doesn't tell me no, but how about this? David Farber was the first name that came to mind. So thank you so much for that and for your leadership here at New York Law School for creating, I think, a really wonderful forum for city officials and others to talk about important issues that we face today. Also want to thank Ross and Alice Sandler, who produced three amazing women, one of whom is a very dear friend of mine, Josie Sandler, who couldn't be here today, but she, in true Josie form, stacked the table with all of our former New York Cares employees who are here, and my friends of over 20 years. Oh my goodness, Chantal, wonderful to see you. And so thank you for that and for that introduction and for all of your leadership and in service to the city. As I also want to thank Con Edison and Greenberg Traurig for supporting today's event, as well as other members of my team. You heard the Dean acknowledge all of our colleagues, including our first Deputy General Counsel, Kelly McNeil, our Communications Director, Jean Weinberg, and many other NYCHA folks who are here with us today. So as Ross mentioned, I've been the chair and CEO of the New York City Housing Authority since March 2014. NYCHA is the city's largest landlord, and as well as the country's largest public housing authority. 1 in 12 New Yorkers count on us for some form of home or shelter. NYCHA is home to more than 400,000 residents, 2,600 buildings, 250,000 commercial square feet, and another 1.5 million non-residential commercial square feet. If we were a city, we'd be the second largest city in New York State and larger than the city of Minneapolis. So as you might imagine, our law department is quite busy. And we are really integral, I think, as Ross said, to the health of this city, to the future of this city, and something that the mayor from day one has talked about as an essential component to a vibrant, diverse, and inclusive New York City is the health of the country's largest and oldest public housing authority. It's important to note that we have a legal staff of about 80 attorneys that are supported by 80 support staff who function really as a full-service corporate law firm for both the authority and our residents. The story of public housing in New York City, though, is in particular not so dissimilar to the story of public infrastructure around this country. The sad shame is that the continued federal disinvestment has meant a steady and insidious decline of this precious asset. We've lost more than $1 billion in federal funding since 2001, and more than 30% of that federally eligible capital funds as well. The result? Slow repairs, persistent repair challenges, the headlines, trash, really deplorable conditions in some of our communities. But New York City and the de Blasio administration is seeking to turn the page and write a new story for public housing and its residents. While we forcefully and loudly believe that all levels of government must support the preservation of its public and affordable rental housing in this country, we can no longer ignore our financial reality. Last May, as Ross indicated, the mayor and I released Next Generation NYCHA, our 10-year strategic plan that really is designed to set us on a sustainable financial path and to make a down payment on our $17 billion capital need or repair needs. Our plan is very simple. It's pragmatic. It's not the kitchen sink. It's really focused on us returning to the core business of being the country's largest housing provider, creating and managing to a new financial model, leveraging our real estate, and fundamentally changing the way we engage with our residents, our most important stakeholders. For the purposes of today's discussion, I wanted to talk about that first pillar, becoming a better housing provider or landlord. So on average, every year, our attorneys manage over 30,000 rent collection and lease violation cases in housing court and through administrative hearings. They also handle corporate affairs, contracts, torts, real estate development, labor and employment issues, commercial law, policy and legislation, and housing litigation. We are challenged by several distinct realities to the Housing Authority. One is that the lease is the main tool that the authority has to use to enforce or encourage certain actions. NYCHA also operates under a 40-year-old consent decree known as Escalera, which enshrines significant due process requirements that govern every aspect of and around administrative actions with our tenants. So by design, the landlord-tenant relationship is litigated administratively and in housing court, where in what is already one of the most tenant-friendly court systems in this country, NYCHA is perceived as the housing of last resort, thereby limiting our ability to use all of our legal remedies against and with to support the types of actions that are helpful to the authority. Even still, NYCHA deploys a range of tools to make the relationship with our tenants less litigious. By example, working with tenants who owe back rent early and often and helping them to avoid eviction. For example, from 2014 to 2015, the numbers of residents who are evicted for non-payment has been decreased by 50%. And it is because of these types of initiatives that we have allowed people to and supported people to remain housed. I'd like to say NYCHA is in the business of housing people, not evicting people. So it's really important that these tools work and that we keep people in their homes. But the seemingly overwhelming workload certainly does constrain our ability as we now are really working to not only ask more of our tenants, but but because of that, needing to change the way we do our business. So we focused all of our solutions on how to improve customer service, which in turn should and hopefully will reduce some of these challenges. For example, NYCHA has spent time and money on the development of digital tools that make it easier and faster for residents to pay rent and to do this in a easy way. Currently, we collect about 70% of the rent that is due to us, or about $800 million. Rental revenues are the one part of our financial reality that we have some agency over. So our ability to actually increase that has a direct result in our ability to improve our operations. Cutting down on rent violations by improving services, such a very logical connection, reduces not only legal costs for the families, but also for the authority. In many of the conversations that I've had with residents across the city, one of the first things that the mayor said to me when I accepted this assignment was, Shola, you have to reset the relationships with your residents and then also come up with a plan to fix the housing authority. Okay, not so hard. But as I sort of accepted that challenge, it was really important that I listen and to our residents. So starting with day one at Middletown Plaza in the Bronx, sort of began a tradition and of not a tradition, but really of how we are working in listening, putting the residents first in all of our work. So I've now visited more than 130 of our 328 developments. I think I have another half year to go if I continue on this pace. But it's been a really interesting set of conversations. And what was clear, whether it was from residents or my employees, 11,210, a third of whom live in NYCHA, one of the things that was consistent was a desire for a safe, clean, and connected community, regardless of where they live. This was something that we all it resonates with all of us. And one of the things that is a really sad fact and reality is that NYCHA residents are 5 times more likely, to be the victims of violent crime here in the city as opposed to the rest of New Yorkers. And so in these conversations and the reality of the statistically small but yet persistent violent criminal element that is in our developments who prey on our residents, we really have to take and had to take a more proactive stance in eliminating that threat. And so we really deepened the relationship with our colleagues at NYPD, but really initiated a completely new set of digital information sharing tools and processes around really trying to ensure the tenancy of the residents who should be in the housing authority and really working to remove those who should not be. So as we work to fundamentally change the way we do our business through the delivery of services, for example, the length of time for basic maintenance repairs has decreased from 12 days in June of 2015 to now about 7.2 days citywide. We also are talking about a cultural shift. Issues that have proven more intractable include our credibility in housing courts due to the disinvestment, historic disinvestment, and poor service. This is a reality, and there is precedent for not only these perceptions. So we're working hard to change these perceptions by transforming our operational model, really pushing down accountability at our developments, and changing the delivery model of services at the developments. But 40 years of disinvestment doesn't change overnight, but focused, rational, and data-driven management solutions are what will produce the results that our residents deserve. And so we continue on our effort. It is a clear focused plan that is very different from what is happening in public housing authorities across the country. For the students in the room who have studied this, New York is unique in that we are not talking about tearing down our buildings. We are talking about preserving them not only for the residents of today, but for the next generation. But let's be clear, that is a very different approach. It is not in line with the federal funding sources, and so it requires a bold and pragmatic approach to new sources, not only for the preservation, but the continued operation of these buildings. So that is what Next Generation NYCHA will accomplish. We believe that through our plan and a series of very specific strategies that we will begin to eliminate the recurring deficits that the authority has operated under for the past decade, and really begin to essentially break even and get to a point of financial sustainability. And it is at that point that we can then really begin the large-scale transformation and rehabilitation of our portfolio. This administration from day one has recognized how important the Housing Authority is. A couple of major shifts, not only in policy, but also resulting in resources, was the forgiveness of our police payments. Many of you are familiar with that NYCHA paid almost $70 million every year for policing services, as if we were not part of the city. And it was one of the things that the mayor reversed and forgave right within 90 days of being in office. The other thing is that the Housing Authority paid property taxes. Since 1949, we've been paying property taxes to the city of New York, and at a tune of about $40 million every year. And so this administration also forgave that. So putting those dollars back into our budget has allowed us to really begin to reinvest in those core services to address some of our persistent needs. So this is, we call this the rainbow graph because it's such an interesting illustration of the financial challenges in front of us. The multicolored lines really sort of suggest how we begin to attack the annual operating deficits and why that's so important, so that we can address the larger capital needs, really trying to put the organization and its organizational finances on a stronger path. So as part of that, those resources will also help us address that $17 billion need by actually investing and rehabilitating some of our most challenged parts of our portfolio, and thus really reducing that need as well. And as we do that, we then will work with the city to, as I said, really begin a large, major capital modernization effort on the rest of the portfolio. So this is, we named it Next Generation NYCHA for a reason, because this is a generation's worth of work. We are working not only with legacy challenges, but real cultural shifts within the organization in terms of improving and changing the operating model. And that has to happen so that we can deliver on our mission and ensure that the Housing Authority is around for another generation. So I want to thank the New York Law School again for the opportunity to talk a bit about what we're doing, and I would be pleased to take your questions. Thank you.
Great. As we do, we have microphones on both sides. People may go to the microphone, and we'd ask that you state your name. Also, I anticipate there'll be more than a few questions or comments. We'd appreciate if you'd be relatively short so that everybody can speak. Before we begin, I want to thank Con Edison, which is our consistent sponsor, and Francis Rashevsky, Senior Vice President, is here. The law firm of Greenberg Traurig has also been a consistent sponsor, Verizon, and then also the Gold Star attendees who voluntarily contributed to this breakfast, and they have a gold star on their nameplate. I want to say also that our next breakfast will be with Robert Capers, the new U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District, in April, and we invite you for that as well. So now let's start with questions on my right over here. State your name, please.
Good morning. Michelle Winfield from Samuel J. Tilden Democratic Club Housing Committee
Good morning,
Chair.
Ms. Winfield.
And thank you so much.
Good morning.
I'd like to know from you if you stated you have 80 legal and counsel at the NYCHA. Do you also offer for NYCHA residents in law school internships with your legal team?
So it actually, and our first Deputy General Counsel, Kelly McNeil, this has been, who's right, wave your hand. This has been something that she has been personally committed to in really developing the next generation of young lawyers who are committed to public housing. So there actually is an internship program. I believe it's a 2-year commitment. And we get the best of both worlds, young, bright minds, as well as a lot of good work. So thank you for that
Thank you
question.
so much.
Thank you.
Let's go to this side.
Yes, good morning. Named Thomas Lopez Pierre. For disclosure purposes, I'm a candidate for City Council. In the council district that I seek to run, there are a number of developments, one of them being Douglas Houses, which Carmen Quinones, the Tenant Association President, is here with us today. My question for you is, in your comments, you talked about leveraging NYCHA's real estate. In layman's terms, doesn't that mean basically selling off NYCHA's land for private development? And there are some that would say that's a retreat from the mission at NYCHA. Could you speak on that, please, in more detail? Thank you.
Definitely.
And my daughters love you.
I love that. That's great. So in full disclosure, we're also neighbors. So I see him around at the coffee shop in Harlem and in all manner of more casual settings. So one of the major departures that this administration has made is, as I've mentioned, really reinvesting in the authority by forgiving some of these long-standing payments that we've made to the city. But there's also an acknowledgement that with the continued decline of federal funding, we have to find other unencumbered sources of revenue to sustain our operations. And while we are thrilled that the state is back in the funding game for public housing, and we welcome the continued support there, we have to continue to look for other resources. There are not a lot of options. And so one of the things that this mayor has committed to, and there's been lots to talk about around affordable housing, is the continued development of new affordable housing, the next generation of affordable housing. And so we are part of the mayor's affordable housing plan, of the 200,000 plan. 10,000 of those units will be built all throughout the city on NYCHA development. This is 100% affordable housing that will have preferences for NYCHA residents. And this is something that, frankly, we have done. We did it under previous administrations. There are lots of existing, I think, positive models out there to address the significant affordable housing crisis. The second part of what we are doing is how do we continue to add to the affordable housing portfolio, but how do we raise some money? And so in a limited number of our sites, look, there are only so many valuable real estate markets. How do we continue to add to the affordable housing portfolio, but also raise some revenue through the development of market rate housing? I think, just to correct something that you said, a very distinct policy shift is that we will be leasing our land, not selling. So the land remains in the ownership of the public sector for its entirety. The other distinction is the commitment to the affordability levels that we will maintain in our affordable or next generation NYCHA neighborhoods program, of which we've committed. The affordable program is at 60% AMI or lower. The other distinction, again, is that any revenues, a significant portion of revenues that are generated from the development that we will do goes back to the development where the actual construction will occur. So this is both a pragmatic approach in acknowledging our financial reality, while also contributing to the affordable housing supply and making sure that the residents of the developments where these activities occur are engaged in the process, but also see the benefit of any potential revenues to the authority.
Have you announced any particular sites?
Yes. So as part of the first 100% affordable program, we began a pretty public engagement process with the residents in the neighborhoods in downtown Brooklyn at the Ingersoll development, in the South Bronx at the Millbrook development, and in Brownsville at the Van Dyke community. We'll be making developer selections imminently within those sites. And that's on the 100% affordable lane in our NGN neighborhoods lane, or the 50/50 program as it's colloquially referred to. We have begun engagement at the Wyckoff development in the Burham Hill community of downtown Brooklyn, and at Holmes Towers on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
My name is Madeline Innocent, and I'm a member of Community Board 7, as well as we just created a newly task force, Community Board 7 / NYCHA task force. And the reason why we wanted to create that task force, because not only do we have NYCHA development in our district, we also have people, non-NYCHA residents, that we all need to connect with, because NYCHA is getting so much bad press, or the residents itself are getting so much bad press, that we wanted to work with the community and have a better dialogue. So going forward, how do you engage the not only NYCHA residents, but the community at large, so we all can work together? Because I feel we're all in this together about affordable housing and preserving and doing the things that NYCHA needs to have done, so we can all be better neighbors. So what will you plan to do to engage the community as well?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Innocent. She's a very long-time resident leader. One of the 4 pillars, as you'll recall, of NextGen is engaging with our residents really, and really the broader community in a different way. And there's some very specific plans and initiatives around that. But I think the first commitment is one of showing up and being there. And we have, as you know, a dedicated group of NYCHA staff, our resident engagement team, that we have really are helping to retrain, really focusing them on really a more community and development based approach, as opposed to kind of a more catch-all approach, so that you actually have staff who are at the developments and understand the respective issues of that development. We know that, whatever's happening in Queens may be different for folks that are happening in the Bronx. So one is having a very focused group of people who this is all they do, how they talk to residents in the many different languages that we also need to speak to our residents. But also not changing the way that we do that, right? I have been to many meetings where we stand in front of a room and get yelled at for 45 minutes, and then everyone goes home. And all the NYCHA residents know that that's just kind of like a NYCHA meeting. And the challenges are, like, is that truly productive? Are we actually are we identifying the issues? Are we actually coming up with strategies? And in all seriousness, I understand that anger, but how do we have a more productive conversation? And so we've engaged community organizations in that, some who have organized against me and other organized against the authority. We've engaged them to actually go and door knock in our buildings. We have brought them in to help retrain our staff. We have worked very closely with a number of community-based organizations and advocacy groups, particularly around the conversations around state funding. So I think engagement is going to look different depending on the community, but I think the commitment to do it and to do it in ways that ultimately result in what residents want to see and their imprint, I think, is really important. So, and the community boards are certainly part of that discussion. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Carmen Quinones. I'm the president of Douglas Houses. Sheila, first of all, I want to congratulate you on getting almost all of the presidents involved. We are definitely having those meetings where we are talking with NYCHA about the plan and what needs to be fixed and what we don't want to see. What I want to talk about right now is, as you know, in the media, we have had nothing but bad news. Mold, mildew, people getting sick. We have, we're short of staff. I just want to know, how is it going to get a little better when we have our own people in maintenance in our agencies that are not getting the help that they need to carry out their jobs. Most of our caretakers are overworked and underappreciated. I just need to know, how can we as a community come together and not only help the residents but help NYCHA do its job to keep the place clean and people from losing their jobs.
Right. Thank you for your question, Ms. Quinones. Another very long time active, as you can tell, they show up when I'm here. So, no, all good. So, look, I think kind of embedded in your question are a couple of different things. One, we have about 8,500 folks who are at the developments, right? Whether they be property managers down to caretakers, the men and women who, literally and physically move tons of trash every single day, who clean buildings, and they work incredibly hard in a model that really has not changed since our inception 81 years ago. And so one of the things that we've done this year, in the last 2 years, is really move to an asset-based management approach. This is what HUD has really required a lot of housing authorities across the country, which is the developments should be managed by a property manager who can actually manage their development. Go figure. They actually understand their budgets. They manage to a budget. They actually deploy staff based on that budget. That really, NYCHA had really centralized a lot of that function, so we launched the OpMom initiative in 2014 at 18 developments. Pilots for us are still 22,000 units, where we retrained all of those managers and their supportive staff in current best practices around property management. We're working with organizations like IREM and others around how we retrain folks who a lot of times came up through the organization and may or may not, they are fantastic doers, but really managing to a budget is a new skill set. So really supporting those folks for success has been what we've been focused on over the next year, and I'm pleased to say that we'll be adding to that initiative by the end of this year with more developments, because that will be the way that we manage all 328 of our developments. The other thing I think it's also important to note, that something that this mayor made a huge commitment to was really settling and making sure that all of our municipal workforce had all of their contracts ratified, and that is something that I'm pleased to say we were able to do last summer. So all of our Teamster, DC 37, all of those folks have gotten their contracts, and so no one's losing their job, right? But the other thing is, how do we help people do their job smarter? And really working with the unions to help retrain folks who, and policies and procedures that haven't been updated in a very long time. And so that's been a major focus of our HR and training program. That has been something that I have specifically put resources in to support and will continue to do. The other thing that you mentioned was around sort of the level of cleanliness, and for folks, the poor men and women who work at the King Towers, which is where in my neighborhood that I harass them all the time, because I see it personally and understand what it means when you walk past a development and there's trash and there's just all manner of what seems like disorder. And it doesn't mean that our men and women aren't working hard, but it's about when they're there. It's about when our people are there. 2/3 of our residents work. And so when you leave your house at 8 a.m. in the morning and trash is piled up to 6 feet high, and you come home at 6 o'clock and it's still there, the first thing you say is, didn't these people do work all day? Well, actually they have, but they leave at 4 o'clock because that's their schedule, and that hasn't changed in 60 years. So we're really working with our union colleagues to change that and to really introduce a different level of service, and really adopting more modern property management practices. So more to come on that in the coming days. Thank you.
I'm Aaron Humphrey, a housing resident, TA leader for 344 East 28th Street, Strauss. Also on community board and part of Eleanor Roosevelt Democratic Club. I'd like to commend you on your bringing NYCHA to the digital age. But the thing I want to ask is that I noticed with NYCHA, sometimes there's two sets of information. One set of information they give to the outside community, and another set of information they give to the NYCHA community. For instance, this meeting, resident engagement did not know about. When I called to try to RSVP, they said, we don't know what you're talking about. But yet on political clubs and my other colleagues from the outside communities, they knew about this and they were able to link me in. How can we use these digital tools to make information more streamlined for both communities? Piggybacking on what the lady from Community Board 7 said, we sometimes do find that information is just disseminated and also transmitted in two different ways from an insular NYCHA community to the mainstream community. And as gentrification is bringing us closer together with the park in the dark and land being more valuable and building taking place now in NYCHA grounds, how do we become more at one with the outside community?
Great question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of the various community roles that you play and that you lead. A couple things is that I forcefully reject the idea that there are two communities. I mean, I think that's what this mayor talked about. He talked about a one New York, and the work that we are doing is really to reconnect NYCHA into the city. So I believe we have a duty to ensure that, there isn't the NYCHA community and everybody else. We're 1 in 12 of the city. So it's a major, we are really one New York, and there are very, I think, specific things that we can do to improve the connections. Another major thing that I have been personally committed to is the issue around transparency, really kind of lifting the veil over the Housing Authority. And, we created something within 90 days that talked about NYCHA metrics, right? Everything that you want to know about NYCHA, from our finances to our operational numbers, good and bad, is now online. I said to you earlier, did you know that there's something called the NYCHA app, where you can actually now, in Android and Apple phones, actually schedule your own work orders, pay your rent, find out what's happening at your development. So we've really worked to, I think, put a lot of information not only out there, but also create forums for there to be a more dynamic conversation with residents. But I think your other point is, how come we didn't know about this event? One of the amazing things about this administration is lots of people want to talk about public housing, and lots of institutions want to invite me, our team, to events to talk about that. And believe it or not, I am not in control of the New York Law School's invitation. I know you might think I am. But what I can do, and something that we did start to do, is, my public schedule is public. So letting people know that, the chair is going to be at New York Law School, and if that's something that people want to do, I think that's something that's very important. But certainly all of the events that are NYCHA sponsored, we do, I think, we really work hard to make sure residents know about it, and I'm sure we can do much better in the future. So
Even having your inter-office government, like contact CB6 and
Sorry?
community boards, even having your inter-government department contact community boards and let them know?
It's
Can you do
great
that?
suggestion, great suggestion.
Joel Kupferman, New York Environmental Law and Justice Project. And part of disclosure, we were involved with litigation over the infill land sell-off at NYCHA Housing.
Under the previous administration.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we just hope there's lessons
There is
learned.
no litigation
Okay.
yet.
In the late 1990s, over 700 people died in Chicago from the heat wave.
Yes.
They were public housing residents. We're very concerned that when you sell off that open land, that you start creating heat islands, which most environmentalists admit and architects admit causes an increase in heat. We really want to make sure that you totally value the environmental and public health value of that land. When you start putting up buildings, no matter what type of building it is, it starts increasing the heat for the existing residents. And unfortunately, many NYCHA residents are not mobile and are vulnerable to increased heating. So,
Okay.
and also, in the past litigation, NYCHA claimed that it was separate from the city, that it doesn't, the public trust doctrine doesn't apply. So all those rules in terms of preserving that open space is not applicable. I was just wondering if NYCHA has a new position on their open space
Thank
and the
you.
value thereof.
Thank you. So I'm not going to comment on previous litigation that I wasn't party to, but I think it's really, I think your point is a really good one, and you rightfully point out that more than 40% of our residents are over the age of 62. And even within that, a significant percentage of those folks are over the age of 82. So people have really physically aged in place. NYCHA was the middle-class housing in the 40s and 50s, so it makes perfect sense that a significant part of our population is aging. The point around the vulnerability of those residents and the need to ensure that they are connected to not only services, but also that we have a real understanding of impacts of whether it be new development, but really anything that's happening in the community is a very good one and one that we take very seriously. Any development, and I think it's very important that I correct your statement and say lease, not sell. Any new development that we lease land to happen, as you know, one requirement as part of the city development process and building process is our environmental impact studies, and you probably know this better than I do, working very closely with local community boards on understanding impacts on school seats and other public services. So that remains a very important part of the work we do. We'll be sitting down, we've sat down with our community board officials in the Burham Hill community to talk about this very fact. Heat maps is sort of an interesting point, but school seats, water, all of the sort of environmental impacts, and making sure that NYCHA residents, but really the broader community, that there are the necessary investments in whatever infrastructure is needed to accommodate new development. Look, New York City is a city where buildings come up and go up and down all the time, but I think your caution is a good one. Also important for us to note that we really, because of the lessons learned, I think, post-Sandy, created an emergency services department. We've partnered with the Red Cross. We now know in all 328 of our developments, every single vulnerable person, we have that person's contact information. We know who needs life-saving equipment versus who doesn't. So we've made, I think, a sort of significant amount of strides to be able to identify and support those residents. I'm sure there's more we can do, but I appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Claude L. Winfield, and for full disclosure, I am the Vice Chair of Community Board 6, which is Aaron's community board, and I am the husband of that wonderful lady that spoke to you first. Yeah. And the former chair of our housing committee for 12 years. So I've been working on housing issues for quite a while. My question is the same question that I asked Vicki when she was here from HPD, similar. In Community Board 6, we built the micro units that they put on display. More importantly, we set aside, Councilmember Mendez and I worked on a set aside for that building, were 8 units for veterans solely. As you move forward with your infill projects in the NYCHA, where you're leasing the land and building those buildings, do you have a stream where you're focusing on helping us remove the veterans from the shelters or the streets or wherever they are, so that as you build these affordable units, and hopefully I hope you can bring it down below 40% AMI for the veterans, as you move forward, are you developing a stream so that they can take some of those apartments and some of those units?
So thank you for your question, Mr. Winfield. I think one of the important things that we should all celebrate is that New York officially has ended veteran homelessness, and they have done that.
As we perceive it, yes.
And they have done that largely through the work of the Housing Authority and through the VASH program. For those of you who don't know, veterans have, when you look at sort of federal housing allocations, the VASH program, which is essentially a Section 8 vouchers for veterans, has actually grown. And New York has not only received, the Housing Authority has not only received those, an increasing number of those vouchers, we've utilized 100% of them. So actually getting those vouchers into the hands of veterans. And what the other important thing that that comes along with those VASH vouchers are services, which is also quite important. So a really important question: how do we think about veterans in new development, which would not be public housing? So just a real important distinction. In all of our development that we've done to date, there's been a 25% preference for existing NYCHA residents who wish to leave public housing and perhaps apply for the new developments. That would be at least a minimum in any new development, and something that we remain committed to. But again, I think it's important that we say, when we sat down with the residents of Millbrook in the South Bronx, we heard loudly and clearly that the residents wanted to see senior housing there. So, we only learned that when we sat down after many, many meetings. So I want to make sure that as we do this development, residents can speak to what they believe the issues and priorities for them, because I think it will be different. But you should know that our VASH program is 100% utilized. We work to ensure that all of those vouchers are on the street in the hands of vouchers, and
One last
remain
thing.
committed to
Is that on your website, that
It is
program?
on our website.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, I'm a graduate of the class of '67. My name is Raymond Schwartzberg. I'm a trial attorney. I usually represent injured claimants. In the case of, for example, the New York City Corporation Council, if there's a case against the city, when a claim is interposed, they have an employee known as an assistant corporation counsel, one of a large defense team, and they interpose their answer and defend the case throughout. And so do, for example, most insurance companies have house counsel. In the case of the Housing Authority, in the event of a tort claim or injury claim, invariably, in fact, I should say always, in my many years of experience, they have outside counsel, usually an eminent defense firm, a firm that has a name well known in the defense industry, and they meaning the Housing Authority, pays the per diem rate to a non-employee outside attorney. Now that has got to be very expensive. And I was just wondering why the Housing Authority, bearing in mind that it seems to be embarking upon significant cost-cutting programs, why does that seemingly extremely expensive method of operation continue? Is that also something that's been done for 80 years? So they're going to keep piling up these extraordinary, unnecessary, non-economical expenses because that's the way they've been doing it all these past
Those
years.
are your words, not mine. So,
Well, that's
thank
my
you for your
inquiry.
question. Okay, so just in the context of landlord-tenant claims, 30,000 cases a year.
I mean, towards
I'm getting to. And so I think it's important to note that we have a largely represented number of employees, meaning that with extensive costs associated with that. There are also, as part of whether it be torts, whether it be other types of cases, we've made the decision to use outside counsel on some of those things, and really focusing our in-house staff on matters that around direct landlord-tenant issues, or other corporate affairs issues. We have actually we've reviewed a lot of our contracts that we've had with outside counsel to make sure that they are focused on the areas where we need them to be focused. But this is a practice that the City of New York uses not only at the Housing Authority but throughout. And the cost.
The city doesn't do that.
That's debatable, but I think the cost benefit to us is one that we're able to tap some of the great legal expertise, while also being able to focus our staff resources on the other sort of crushing number of cases that we see.
I find that quite debatable, but thank you for your answer.
Thank you for your comment.
This will be the last question.
Hi, my name is Vivian Laborde. I'm the Director of Government and Community Engagement at Lincoln Center. And under the leadership of our new president, Jed Bernstein, we've really been doing a lot more to reach out to the community. We've been bringing free arts programming and education to more public schools and to more libraries and community centers and homeless shelters throughout the 5 boroughs. And a big priority for us is engaging more NYCHA residents in our programming, particularly in a program through which we'd like to bring more NYCHA residents to our campus to experience live performances and really immerse them in arts-rich experiences. This is part of our efforts in making the great art that Lincoln Center has to offer accessible to all, regardless of income or geographic location. And so I was wondering if you had any advice on how best to engage NYCHA residents in our programming, if there are any particular organizations.
I think you have some volunteers. Well, first of all, thank you to Jed. I've met with Jed. He's a Wesleyan grad. We're the Wesleyan Mafia. We're kind of everywhere. I think that that's wonderful. We want more institutions like Lincoln Center to be connecting with our residents. That's why we created the Fund for Public Housing this year, our 501c3 that's really looking to leverage philanthropy to support these types of partnerships. Look, I think the first thing you do is you talk to residents and you sort of find out what they're interested in, and we can support in terms of making sure that you have space, et cetera, to meet. But I think the first thing to do is to talk to them and to utilize all of the manner of tools that organizations do to find out what programming, what demographics make sense, and any way that we can be helpful through data, et cetera, we'd be happy to do so. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, very good. Thank you very much for the. Thank you for the good questions and for the wonderful answers and the wonderful talk and all that you're doing. As I would like to thank, pardon me, the people at New York Law School who helped put this together: Brian Kasuba, the Associate Director of the Center, Lillian Valley, Santiago, Jesse Deno, and Jessica Brownstein, who've been very helpful, and other students who are here who ushered and helped people come. As we always do at these events, we'd like to give a product of the scholarship of the law school. And to Shola for quite a wonderful morning, very exceptional, with wonderful information about NYCHA. I present the book by my colleague Michael Roffer, The Law Book. It's a wonderful history of the great litigations of the era, none of which involve NYCHA, unfortunately. But the next edition, perhaps. Our next speaker will be Robert Capers, who is the new U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District. In April, please come. We welcome you, everyone, to come. Thank you so much. That was terrific. It was really very good.